My mother died on a Tuesday afternoon in March, with rain drumming against the hospital windows like an insistent messenger trying to deliver news no one wanted to hear. The machines that had been keeping rhythm with her failing heart for the past 3 weeks finally gave up their beeping vigil, going silent one by one until there was nothing left but the sound of rain and my ragged breathing. I held her hand as she took her last breath, my fingers wrapped around hers, so thin now, so fragile, like bird bones wrapped in tissue paper. The woman who'd raised me, protected me, loved me unconditionally through 18 years of life, slipped away into whatever comes next while I sat beside her, helpless to do anything but watch. She'd been sick for 11 months. 11 months of hospitals and treatments, and hope that kept getting smaller and smaller until it was just a pinprick of light in an ocean of darkness. 11 months of watching her fade, watching the vibrant, strong woman who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and made the best chocolate chip cookies in the world turn into this fragile, exhausted stranger who could barely lift her head from the pillow. But even at the end, even when the pain was so bad she could barely speak, she'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "I love you. Never forget that I love you more than anything in this world." I'd said it back. "I love you too, Mom. So much." Those were the last words we exchanged. 10 minutes later, she was gone. I sat there for 20 minutes after her heart stopped, just holding her still warm hand, crying quietly while nurses moved around us with practiced sympathy. They'd seen this 1,000 times before, family members unable to let go, sitting with bodies that were no longer people, trying to hold on to those final moments before everything changed forever. For them, it was another shift, another death, another family's grief to witness and professionally navigate. For me, it was the end of everything I'd known. A nurse, young, with kind eyes and a name tag that said Jennifer, touched my shoulder gently. "Take all the time you need," she said softly. "There's no rush." But there was a rush. There was a whole world outside that hospital room that didn't care that my mother had just died, that would keep spinning regardless of my grief. Bills to pay, arrangements to make, a life to somehow continue living even though the most important person in it was gone. I finally let go of her hand, the hardest thing I'd ever done, and walked out of that room for the last time. The hospital corridor was too bright, too normal, too full of people going about their business like the world hadn't just ended. I found the elevator, rode down to the first floor, walked out into the parking lot where the rain had finally stopped, leaving everything wet and glistening under the late afternoon sun. My car, a beaten-up 2008 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a check engine light that had been on for 6 months, sat in the corner of the lot where I'd left it that morning. Had it only been that morning? It felt like years ago. I got in, started the engine, and just sat there for a long moment, my hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. I needed to call someone, tell someone, make it real by speaking it out loud. I called my father. He answered on the third ring. "Yeah?" Not hello or how is she, just yeah, like I was a telemarketer interrupting his dinner. "Dad," I said, and my voice cracked on the word. "Mom's gone. She died about half an hour ago." There was a pause. Not a grief-stricken pause. Not a shocked pause. Just a pause, like he was processing information about the weather. "Okay," he said finally. "Thanks for letting me know." "Thanks for letting me know," I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" "She was sick. We knew this was coming. It's not a surprise." "She was your wife for 15 years. Ex-wife," he interrupted. "We've been divorced for 7 years. She hasn't been my wife for a long time." "She was still the mother of your child. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Another pause. Then, "Look, I'm sorry she's dead. I'm sorry you're going through this. But I have my own life now. I moved on. You should too." He hung up before I could respond. I sat in that parking lot for another 30 minutes, staring at my phone, trying to process the fact that my father, the man who was supposed to love me, support me, be there for me during the worst moment of my life, had just dismissed my mother's death like it was an inconvenient fact he'd been informed of. Finally, I drove home. To the house I'd grown up in, a modest 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb, with the oak tree in the front yard that I'd climbed as a kid, the porch where Mom and I used to sit on summer evenings drinking lemonade and talking about everything and nothing. The house that had been home for my entire life. The house that was about to stop being home in the worst possible way. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. I got back to the house around 7 p.m. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed obscenely beautiful given how terrible the day had been. Everything should have been gray and dark and miserable, but instead the world was putting on a gorgeous sunset like it was celebrating. My father's black BMW was in the driveway. He'd gotten home before me, which meant he'd left work early, but not early enough to come to the hospital, not early enough to be there when his ex-wife died, just early enough to get home and settle in before having to deal with his inconvenient son. I walked through the front door, my whole body feeling heavy, exhausted from hours of crying and grief and the crushing weight of loss. My father was sitting in the living room with Vanessa, his wife of 5 years, my stepmother, though I'd never been able to call her that without feeling like I was betraying my mother. Vanessa Hartley, now Vanessa Carson, was 10 years younger than my father, blonde and beautiful in a sharp, calculating way that made you think of predatory birds. She was wearing expensive clothes, designer labels that probably cost more than my car was worth, her makeup perfect despite the late hour. She'd married my father 3 years after my parents' divorce, when I was 15, and she'd made it clear from day one that I was an inconvenience in her new life. The house had been my mother's in the divorce settlement. She'd gotten it as part of the agreement. My father had wanted to be rid of it, wanted to start fresh with Vanessa in some shiny new place. But 2 years ago, when Mom got sick and couldn't work anymore, she'd had to sell it back to my father for a fraction of what it was worth. He'd generously let us keep living here, though Vanessa complained constantly about the charity of it, about how we should be more grateful. Now Mom was gone, and I had a terrible feeling about what was coming next. They both looked up when I entered. Neither of them had come to the hospital. Neither of them had been there when Mom took her last breath, when the machines went silent, when the most important person in my life left forever. They'd been here, in this house that had once been my mother's but now belonged to my father, doing whatever it was they did while people died. "She's gone," I said quietly, my voice hoarse from crying. I stood in the doorway, my jacket still on, still damp from the rain. "We know," my father said. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was acknowledging that the mail had been delivered. No sympathy, no compassion, just cold acknowledgement. The hospital called about an hour ago. I waited for something more. And "I'm sorry for your loss," or "Are you okay?" or "This must be so hard for you," or literally anything that suggested he gave a damn about his son's grief. But there was nothing. Just those cold blue eyes looking at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into his house uninvited. Vanessa smiled slightly. Actually smiled, her perfectly painted lips curving upward in an expression that looked like satisfaction. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy that didn't match her smile, "I suppose that's that then. Such a shame. Your poor mother fought so hard." "Such a shame?" I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. She said it the way you might comment on a canceled TV show or a restaurant closing down. Mild disappointment, nothing more. "Oh, don't be dramatic, sweetie." She waved a hand dismissively, her wedding ring, a massive diamond that had cost more than a year of my mother's salary, catching the light. "She was sick for almost a year. We all knew it was coming. It's better this way, really. Now everyone can move on with their lives instead of being trapped in this awful limbo." "Better this way?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother just died. How is that better? "Better than dragging it out for another 6 months, Vanessa said, examining her manicured nails. The medical bills were astronomical, the stress on everyone, the constant hospital visits and bad news. At least now it's over. Clean break, time to move forward." I looked at my father, waiting for him to say something, to tell his wife to shut her cruel mouth, to show some basic human decency toward his grieving son. But he just sat there in his leather armchair, new furniture that Vanessa had bought, replacing everything my mother had chosen, staring at me with those expressionless eyes. "I need to lie down," I said finally, unable to stand being in the same room with them for another second. "It's been the worst day of my life, and I just need to sleep." "About that," my father said, and something in his tone made my stomach drop. A certain coldness, a finality. "We need to have a conversation. Sit down." I didn't want to sit. I wanted to go to my room, close the door, and cry until I had no tears left. But something about his voice, about the way Vanessa was looking at me with barely concealed anticipation, made me think I needed to hear this standing up. "I'm good here," I said. My father stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the darkening street where neighbors were coming home from work, their lives continuing normally while mine was falling apart. When he turned back to face me, his expression was cold, businesslike, the look he probably used when firing people at his job. "You can't stay here anymore." The words didn't make sense at first. They were just sounds, syllables that my brain refused to process into meaning. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the clarification that would make those words make sense. "What?" I finally managed. "This is my house now," he said, speaking slowly like he was explaining something to a child. "Your mother's gone. She has no claim to it anymore. You're 18 years old. You're an adult. It's time for you to find your own place to live." "Dad, she just died. Today. A few hours ago." "I'm aware of when she died." He cut me off sharply, his voice rising slightly. "The hospital called me, remember? But that doesn't change the situation. This house belongs to me. I own it. I paid for it when your mother had to sell it back. You have no legal claim to be here. You're not my responsibility anymore." "Not your responsibility?" My voice was getting louder too, anger starting to burn through the shock and grief. "I'm your son, your only child. How am I not your responsibility?" "You're 18, he repeated, like this magic number changed everything about our relationship, about basic human decency, about what fathers owe their children. "You're legally an adult. Adults take care of themselves. They don't mooch off their parents indefinitely." "Mooch? I've been taking care of Mom for 11 months. I've been at the hospital every day. I've been working part-time to help pay bills. I haven't been mooching. I've been trying to keep my mother alive." "And now she's dead," Vanessa interjected, her voice sharp, cutting through my rising anger like a knife. "So that chapter is closed. Time to start the next one. And that next chapter doesn't include you living here rent-free, eating our food, using our utilities." "Our house," my father added. "Our food, our utilities. Vanessa's right. We've been generous letting you stay here while your mother was sick, but that was temporary. A courtesy. Now it's time for you to leave." I looked back and forth between them, trying to find something human in their faces, some trace of compassion or decency or acknowledgement that they were throwing a grieving teenager out onto the street on the day his mother died, but there was nothing. My father looked determined, resolved. Vanessa looked triumphant. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, hating how my voice cracked, how young I sounded. My father shrugged. Actually shrugged, like my homelessness was a minor logistics problem. "Not my problem to solve. You're 18. Figure it out. Get a job, rent a room somewhere. Maybe one of your friends will let you crash for a while until you get on your feet." "I have a job. I work at the grocery store. I make $12 an hour. That's not enough to rent an apartment." "Then get a second job, or a better job, or join the military, or go to community college and live in a dorm. There are options. You're just not trying hard enough to find them." "My mother just died," I said again, slower this time, emphasizing each word. "Today, a few hours ago. I watched her die. I held her hand while she took her last breath. And you want me to pack up and leave right now?" "Not right now," my father said, and for a moment I thought maybe there was some mercy coming. "Tomorrow, first thing in the morning. I'm giving you tonight to pack your things and make arrangements. That's more than generous, considering you have no legal right to be here at all." Vanessa laughed. Actually laughed, a high-pitched sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, honey, you didn't actually think you could just keep living here indefinitely, did you? Your mother's dead. Whatever little agreement she had with your father died with her. This is our house, mine and your father's. There's no room for freeloading adult children." "Freeloading?" The word came out as almost a shout. "I'm not freeloading. I've been taking care of my dying mother. You've been a burden," Vanessa interrupted, standing up now, moving closer. She was tall in her heels, looking down at me with contempt clear in her perfectly made-up face. "Am a constant reminder of your father's failed first marriage. A drain on resources that could be better spent elsewhere. Your mother babied you, made you think you were special, filled your head with nonsense about college and futures and dreams. But the reality is this. You're ordinary. You're nothing special. And now that your mother's not here to coddle you and make excuses for you, it's time to face reality." "Don't talk about my mother like that," I said, my hands clenching into fists. "I'll talk about her however I want in my own house," Vanessa shot back. "She was a weak woman who made poor decisions her entire life. Marrying your father in the first place, mistake. Having you, bigger mistake. Refusing to just disappear gracefully after the divorce instead of hanging around like a ghost making everyone uncomfortable, biggest mistake of all. And now she's finally gone, and good riddance. At least now we don't have to pretend to care anymore." I moved toward her before I even realized what I was doing. Not to hit her, I'd never hit anyone, but just to, I don't know what. Make her stop talking. Make her take back those horrible words about my mother. My father stepped between us. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't give her a reason to call the police. Don't make this worse than it already is." Worse than it already is? I was shaking now, my whole body trembling with rage and grief and disbelief. How could this possibly be worse? My mother died today, and you're throwing me out. You're both standing here in the house that used to be hers, telling me I'm nothing. How is there any worse left? "We could call the cops right now instead of giving you until morning," Vanessa said sweetly. "We could have you arrested for trespassing. Is that what you want?" "Vanessa," my father said, but he didn't tell her to stop. Didn't tell her she was wrong. Just said her name, like a mild reproof that meant nothing. "He needs to understand the reality of his situation," Vanessa continued. "His mother didn't leave him anything. Not a penny, not a possession, not a thing. She died broke, with nothing but debt and medical bills. The hospital is going to come after the estate, what little there is, and they're going to find nothing. Zero. Zip. She has no savings, no assets, no insurance, nothing. She left you exactly what you deserve. Nothing." "That's not true," I said, but even as I said it, doubt crept in. Mom had been sick for so long. The bills had been enormous. She'd stopped working 8 months ago when she got too weak. I knew she'd been stressed about money, about how we'd pay for everything, but surely she had something, some savings, some plan. "It's completely true," Vanessa said, crossing her arms, looking satisfied. "I've seen the financial records. Your father had to for legal purposes. She drained her savings, paying medical bills. Her car was repossessed 3 months ago. Or did you not notice you were driving her to appointments in that piece of junk you call a vehicle? Her retirement account is empty. Her jewelry was sold off piece by piece to pay for medications. The furniture in this house technically belongs to your father since he owns the house. There is nothing left. Your mother was a financial disaster who left you with nothing but debt and bad memories." "Stop it," I said, but my voice had no force behind it. I was too tired, too sad, too broken. "I'm just being honest," Vanessa said. "Someone needs to tell you the truth. Your mother coddled you your whole life, let you think you were special, let you think there'd always be someone to take care of you, but there isn't. She's gone. Your father has moved on. You're on your own now, time to grow up and face reality." "The reality is that you're a cruel person," I said quietly. "The reality is that my father chose you over his own son. The reality is that I just lost the only person who ever actually loved me, and the two of you are celebrating." "We're not celebrating," my father said, but he didn't sound convincing. "We're just being practical. You need to move on. We all need to move on." "Move on," I repeated numbly. "She died 4 hours ago." "And standing here arguing isn't bringing her back," Vanessa said. "So go pack your things. You have until 8 a.m. tomorrow. After that, anything you leave behind becomes ours to do with as we please. I'd suggest you get started." I looked at my father one more time, searching for any hint of the man I'd known as a child, the man who'd taught me to throw a baseball, who'd come to my elementary school plays, who'd once told me he was proud of me. But that man was gone, replaced by this cold stranger who could throw his son out on the street without a second thought. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly. "I hope she's worth losing your son." "You're being dramatic," my father said. "This isn't about losing anyone. This is about you becoming independent. You'll thank us someday." But I wouldn't. We all knew I wouldn't. I went upstairs to my room, my childhood room, with posters still on the walls from high school, with books and clothes and trophies from Little League and art projects from elementary school, and all the accumulated debris of 18 years of life. I looked around at everything I'd have to leave behind, everything that wouldn't fit in my car, everything that made up the physical history of my existence. I pulled my old duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Clothes first, enough for a week, that's all I could fit. Toiletries from the bathroom, my laptop, my phone charger, my school books, even though I had no idea if I'd be able to continue community college now. A few photos of Mom from before she got sick, when she was still healthy and smiling and whole. I found a shoebox under my bed full of mementos. Birthday cards from Mom, a Mother's Day card I'd made in 2nd grade with my handprint painted as a flower. A note she'd written me when I was 12 and having a hard time at school. "You are smart, you are capable, you are loved. Don't let anyone make you feel less than amazing." I packed the whole box. It barely fit, but I made it fit. By midnight, I was done. One duffel bag containing my entire life. Everything else, my furniture, my books, my childhood, my memories, I'd have to leave behind. Vanessa would probably throw it all out, or sell it, or burn it. She'd erase any evidence that I'd ever lived in this house. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I just lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the worst day of my life over and over. Mom dying, the hospital, the phone call with my father, coming home to find them waiting to throw me out, Vanessa's cruel words, my father's cold indifference. At 7:45 a.m., I carried my duffel bag downstairs. My father was already awake, sitting in the kitchen with coffee, reading something on his tablet. He looked up when I entered, but didn't say anything. "I'm going," I said. "Okay." "That's it? Just okay?" "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Maybe goodbye, maybe good luck, maybe I love you." He looked at me for a long moment. Then, "Goodbye. Good luck." I waited for the third phrase. It never came. I walked out the front door, threw my duffel bag in the back seat of my car, and drove away from the only home I'd ever known. In my rearview mirror, I saw my father standing in the doorway, watching me leave. He didn't wave, didn't look sad, just watched, expressionless, until I turned the corner and he disappeared from view. I drove to my friend Jake's apartment. He was a year older than me, already graduated and working at a warehouse. We'd been friends since middle school. When I called and told him what happened, he didn't hesitate. "Dude, that's brutal. Yeah, you can crash here. I've got a couch. It's not much, but it's yours as long as you need it." So I slept on Jake's couch in his tiny one-bedroom apartment that smelled like old pizza and gym socks. It was cramped and uncomfortable and humiliating, but it was somewhere. It was better than my car. It was what I had. I thought that was rock bottom. I thought things couldn't possibly get worse. I had no idea that in 3 days I'd get a letter that would change everything. I had no idea my mother had been planning for this exact scenario. I had no idea that she'd spent the last 3 years of her life making sure that even in death, she could protect me from the people who'd hurt us both. 3 days after my mother died, while I was lying on Jake's couch at 2 p.m. on a Friday because I had nowhere else to be and nothing else to do, Jake came home from work early and handed me a cream-colored envelope. "This came to my place," he said. "Addressed to you. Looks official." I sat up, taking the envelope. It was thick, expensive paper with an embossed return address. Morrison and Associates, attorneys at law. My name was written in neat typescript on the front, care of Jake's address. "How did they know I was here?" I asked. "No idea. Maybe your mom told them. Open it." My hands were shaking as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter on professional letterhead. "Dear Mr. Carson, we represent the estate of Margaret Ann Carson, your late mother. On behalf of our firm and our client, please accept our condolences for your loss. We request your presence at the formal reading of Mrs. Carson's last will and testament, scheduled for March 28th at 2 p.m. at our offices, located at 450 Riverside Drive, Suite 300. Your attendance is mandatory as you are specifically named as a beneficiary in the will. Please call our office at the number below to confirm your attendance. If you cannot attend in person, please notify us immediately so we can make alternative arrangements. This reading will also be attended by other parties named in the will. Sincerely, Richard Morrison, Escairn Senior Partner." I read it 3 times, a beneficiary. Vanessa had said Mom left me nothing. She'd said Mom died broke, with nothing but debt. But here was a letter from a law firm saying I was named in her will. Jake was reading over my shoulder. "Dude, that's good, right? Maybe she left you some money." Vanessa said she had nothing, said everything went to medical bills. Vanessa's a lying bitch who'd sell her own mother for a designer handbag. Don't believe anything that comes out of her mouth. He was right. I shouldn't believe Vanessa. But I'd seen the bills. I'd watched Mom stress about money. I'd heard her on the phone with creditors, trying to negotiate payment plans she couldn't afford. The idea that she had anything left to leave me seemed impossible. But maybe there was something. Maybe she'd had a small insurance policy. Maybe she'd saved a little money I didn't know about. Maybe it was just her personal effects, her jewelry, her clothes, things with sentimental value, even if they weren't worth much. I called the law office. A receptionist with a professional voice answered. "Morrison and Associates. How may I help you?" "Hi, I received a letter about attending a will reading. For Margaret Carson?" "Your name, please?" "David Carson. I'm her son." "One moment, please." I heard typing. "Yes, Mr. Carson, we have you on the list. Can you confirm you'll be attending on March 28th at 2 p.m.? "Yes, I'll be there." "Excellent. Please bring a photo ID. There will be other beneficiaries and parties present, so please plan to arrive a few minutes early." "Other beneficiaries? Who else is going to be there?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of the will over the phone. Mr. Morrison will explain everything at the reading." After I hung up, I immediately called my father's house. I wanted to tell him about the will reading. Part of me hoped maybe this would be a turning point. Maybe he'd realize he'd been too harsh. Maybe we could reconcile. Vanessa answered. What? Not even hello. Just what? Like I was bothering her. There's a will reading, I said. For Mom, March 28th at 2 p.m. Morrison and Associates on Riverside Drive. A will reading? She laughed, that same cruel laugh I was starting to hate more than any sound in the world. Oh, honey, that's adorable. Your mother had a will. How precious. The lawyer said I'm named as a beneficiary. I'm sure you are. You're probably getting her collection of worthless costume jewelry and maybe some furniture that's been in the garage. Don't get your hopes up. Your mother died with less than $500 in her bank account and more debt than she could ever pay off. This is just a formality. The law requires will readings, even when there's nothing worth distributing. The letter said other parties would be there too. Of course we will. Your father is still technically her ex-husband. He needs to be there to ensure there are no claims against him for any remaining debts. And I'm coming because someone needs to protect your father's interests from whatever ridiculous provisions your mother might have written while high on pain medication. She wasn't high on pain medication when she wrote her will. How do you know? Did you supervise the writing of it? No? Then you don't know anything. She was probably out of her mind, making crazy requests that have no legal standing. But don't worry, we'll be there to make sure everything is handled properly. See you on the 28th. Try to wear something presentable. You look homeless. She hung up. I sat there on Jake's couch, staring at the phone, the letter from the law office still in my hand. Vanessa's words echoed in my head. Worthless costume jewelry. Less than $500 in the bank. Nothing worth distributing. But a lawyer had sent me an official letter, had used terms like mandatory and specifically named as a beneficiary. That had to mean something, right? Don't listen to her, Jake said, seeing my expression. She doesn't know what's in the will. Nobody does except the lawyer. Go to the reading. Find out. Maybe your mom had some life insurance you didn't know about. I wanted to believe him, but I'd learned not to hope too much. Hope was dangerous. Hope made the fall hurt worse when reality crushed it. The next 2 weeks and a half crawled by. I picked up extra shifts at the grocery store, trying to save money for first month's rent on an apartment somewhere. I searched Craigslist for rooms to rent, finding nothing I could afford. I applied for more jobs, better jobs, anything that paid more than $12 an hour. I got rejection after rejection. At night, lying on Jake's couch, I'd think about my mom, about how she'd spent her last months, about how stressed she'd been about money, about how she'd apologized to me, over and over, for being a burden, for costing so much, for not having more to leave me. I'm sorry I can't do more for you, she'd said a week before she died, her voice weak, her hand trembling in mine. I wanted to leave you something to help you start your life. But everything's gone. The medical bills took everything. It's okay, Mom, I'd told her. I don't need money, I just need you. But I didn't have her anymore, and I definitely needed money. I was barely surviving on minimum wage, living on a friend's couch, with no prospects and no future. The morning of March 28th arrived. I put on my best clothes, khakis, and a button-down shirt I'd worn to my high school graduation, now a little tight but still presentable. I drove downtown to Riverside Drive, found the building, parked in a paid lot I couldn't afford, and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Morrison and Associates occupied a suite with dark wood doors and brass plaques. The reception area was elegant in an old-fashioned way. Leather furniture, oriental rugs, oil paintings of serious men who were probably judges or famous lawyers. A receptionist sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car. David Carson, I told her. I'm here for the will reading. Of course, Mr. Carson. Please have a seat. Mr. Morrison will call you in shortly. There are other parties who haven't arrived yet. I sat down in one of the leather chairs. 5 minutes later, my father and Vanessa walked in. Vanessa was dressed like she was going to a fashion show, a designer dress that probably cost thousands, expensive heels, jewelry that glittered under the lights. She looked like money personified. My father wore an expensive suit, looking every bit the successful corporate executive he was. They saw me and Vanessa smiled. Not a friendly smile, a predatory smile. Well, well, she said, walking over. Look at you, all dressed up for your inheritance of nothing. Those pants are too short. And is that shirt from high school? It doesn't even fit anymore. Leave me alone, I said quietly. Oh, I will. After we wrap up this little formality and I never have to see you again. I just wanted to manage your expectations. You're about to go into that room and hear a bunch of legal language about assets and bequests and distributions, and you're going to think, maybe there's something here. But there isn't. Your mother left you nothing but disappointment. I just want you to be prepared for that. How would you know what's in her will? Because I know your mother had nothing, and I know your father checked her financial records before agreeing to let her sell back the house. She was broke then, and she died broke. Do the math, genius. The receptionist called our names. Mr. Morrison will see you now. We filed into a conference room with a long mahogany table and more oil paintings of serious men. Windows overlooked the city. Everything spoke of money, success, permanence. Richard Morrison was already seated at the head of the table. He was a man in his early 60s with silver hair, sharp gray eyes, and an expression that suggested he'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. He wore a suit that made my father's expensive suit look cheap. He stood when we entered, shook each of our hands formally. His grip was firm, professional. When he shook my hand, his eyes lingered on my face for a moment, and I thought I saw something there. Sympathy, knowledge, I couldn't tell. Please sit, he said, gesturing to chairs around the table. We have several matters to discuss today regarding the estate of Margaret Ann Carson. Vanessa sat down with a dramatic sigh. Can we make this quick? I have a nail appointment at 4. Morrison looked at her coolly. This will take as long as it takes, Mrs. Carson. The law requires certain procedures be followed. He opened a leather folder and pulled out documents. This is the last will and testament of Margaret Ann Carson, executed on January 15th of this year, approximately 2 months and 14 days before her death. She was of sound mind and body when this will was prepared, and it was properly witnessed and notarized according to the laws of this state. Vanessa rolled her eyes. My father sat expressionless. I just tried to breathe, tried to prepare myself for disappointment. Morrison began reading. I, Margaret Ann Carson, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. I hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils. Get to the good part, Vanessa muttered. Morrison ignored her. First, regarding my primary residence. I acknowledge that the property located at 847 Oakwood Drive is not part of my estate, as it was sold to Thomas Carson in August of 2 years ago. I make no claims to this property. See? Vanessa stage whispered to me. No house. Second, regarding my vehicle. I acknowledge that my 2015 Honda Accord was repossessed by the lending institution in December of last year due to non-payment. I make no claims to this vehicle. No car, Vanessa added gleefully. Third, regarding personal effects. I leave any remaining clothing, household items, and personal belongings currently in storage to my son, David Carson. In storage? I asked. What storage? Morrison made a note. We'll discuss the specifics after the full reading. Please hold your questions until then. He continued. Fourth, regarding jewelry and valuables. I acknowledge that most of my jewelry collection was sold during my illness to pay medical expenses. Any remaining pieces... There are no remaining pieces, Vanessa interrupted. She sold it all. I checked. Morrison looked up sharply. Mrs. Carson, if you interrupt me one more time, I will have security escort you from this reading. You are here as a courtesy because Mr. Thomas Carson requested it. You have no legal standing as a beneficiary. I strongly suggest you remain quiet. Vanessa's mouth snapped shut, her face flushing red. Morrison returned to the document. Any remaining pieces of jewelry are to go to my son, David Carson. Fifth, regarding financial assets. I leave any remaining funds in my checking account at First National Bank to my son, David Carson. All 420 savars of it, Vanessa muttered under her breath, but quietly enough that Morrison didn't call her out. Sixth, regarding investments. I leave any remaining funds in my retirement account to my son, David Carson. Vanessa actually snorted, but didn't say anything. Morrison looked up from the document. Those are the primary assets mentioned in the initial portion of the will. However, my father spoke for the first time. However, Morrison repeated, there is a separate addendum to this will, a sealed document that Mrs. Carson specifically requested not be opened or read until all primary assets had been discussed. The room went completely silent. What kind of addendum? Vanessa asked, her voice suddenly sharp, alert. Mrs. Carson left specific instructions. The addendum was to be sealed in a separate envelope held by this office and only opened at the formal reading of her will after all standard assets had been listed. She was very particular about this. Morrison pulled a red wax-sealed envelope from his folder. The seal had an imprint. Initials, I thought, though I couldn't read them from where I sat. This addendum was witnessed by myself and my partner, and notarized separately from the main will. It is legally binding. He carefully broke the wax seal. It cracked with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room, and unfolded several pages of paper. I could see handwriting, my mother's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere, neat, careful, the way she used to write notes in my lunchbox when I was little. Morrison adjusted his reading glasses and began. This addendum must not be read until after all other property has been assigned and discussed. This is essential. I need those listening to understand what they think they're getting before I reveal what they're actually getting." My father sat up straighter. Vanessa's expression changed from bored superiority to sharp attention. Morrison continued reading in my mother's words. "To my ex-husband, Thomas, and his wife, Vanessa. I know you're reading this now. Or rather, I know you're listening as it's read. You're probably sitting there smiling to yourselves, thinking you've won something. Thinking I died with nothing. Thinking you can finally be rid of my son without any complications or consequences." Vanessa's smile disappeared completely. "You're thinking I died broke, that medical bills consumed everything I had, that I left my son with nothing but memories and maybe a box of old photos. You've probably told him as much. Probably enjoyed watching his hope die, watching him realize his mother couldn't protect him anymore." I was holding my breath. Morrison's voice was steady, professional, but there was something in his expression, satisfaction, maybe, as he read my mother's words. "But here's the thing you need to understand about me. About all those years you underestimated me. I was smarter than both of you combined." My father's face went pale. "When Thomas and I divorced 7 years ago, I was devastated. Not because I loved him anymore. I'd stopped loving him years before, when I realized what a weak, selfish man he'd married. I was devastated because I knew he was marrying a gold digger who would cut our son out of everything. I knew Vanessa would poison him against his own child. I knew that when I died, neither of them would take care of my boy." Vanessa's hands were clenched into fists on the table. "So I made a plan. It took years. It required sacrifices and careful hiding and meticulous record-keeping. But I did it. I protected my son from you, and now, even though I'm gone, I'm going to save him one last time." Morrison turned the page. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. "First, land. Before I married Thomas, when I was 23 years old, my parents died in a car accident. They left me everything they had, including 47 acres of woodland in upstate New York, near Lake Placid. There's a small cabin on the property, rustic, old, but structurally sound. The land has water access, road access, and is zoned for residential use." Vanessa made a small sound. Morrison ignored her and continued. "Thomas never knew about this property. I inherited it 1 month before our wedding, and I chose never to mention it. I paid the annual property taxes from my personal account that he never had access to. The deed has always been in my maiden name, Margaret Ann Brennan. He never looked for it because he never knew it existed." "That's illegal," Vanessa blurted out. "Hiding assets during a marriage." "Actually," Morrison interjected mildly, "inherited property held in a maiden name and maintained separately is not marital property in this state. As long as no marital funds were used for improvements or taxes, which they weren't, it remains the separate property of the inheritor. Please don't interrupt again." He continued reading. "That land is now worth approximately $380,000. I had it appraised last year by a certified appraiser. The cabin alone is worth $50,000 after renovations. The rest is the land value, waterfront property in the Adirondacks. It goes entirely to my son, David Carson." I couldn't breathe. $380,000. That couldn't be real. That was impossible. Second, money. 8 years ago, shortly after my divorce from Thomas was finalized, I opened a bank account at Mountain Valley Credit Union in the next county. I used my maiden name. I gave the credit union an address at a P.O. box that Thomas didn't know about, and every month for 8 years I deposited money into that account. "What money?" my father said. "You didn't have money. You were barely making ends meet." "Mr. Carson," Morrison said sharply, "you are not entitled to interrupt this reading. One more outburst and you'll be asked to leave." My father went silent, but his face was red. Morrison continued. "The money came from several sources. First, my salary. I worked as a bookkeeper for a small business. Thomas thought I worked part-time and made very little. I actually worked full-time and made $45,000 a year. I told him I made $22,000. The difference went into my secret account." "You lied to me?" my father said, his voice strangled. "For 8 years?" "Apparently so," Morrison said mildly. "Shall I continue?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Second, I sold things. Not everything, just enough. Some of my old textbooks from college, some furniture Thomas didn't notice, some jewelry he'd given me over the years that I claimed to have lost. I got good at selling things on eBay and Craigslist without anyone knowing. That money went into the account too. Third, I was frugal. I clipped coupons, I shopped sales. I never bought new clothes for myself. I saved every penny I could, and all of it, went into that account, growing, waiting, protecting my son's future. Over 8 years, with careful saving and decent interest rates, that account grew to $127,000. It goes entirely to my son, David Carson. Vanessa stood up suddenly. This is fraud. She was hiding money. That's illegal. That account should have been declared during the divorce. Sit down, Mrs. Carson, Morrison said coldly. The account was opened after the divorce was finalized. Post-divorce earnings are not marital property. Everything Mrs. Carson did was entirely legal. He waited until Vanessa sat down, then continued. Third, jewelry. When my grandmother died, she left me her collection. Real jewelry, not costume pieces. A diamond necklace from the 1920s, a pearl set from the 1940s, an emerald ring from the 1960s. Beautiful, valuable pieces. Thomas always thought they were fake, cheap imitations. He saw them in my jewelry box and never gave them a second thought. So I kept them in a safety deposit box at a bank he didn't know about. I had them appraised last year. They're worth approximately $85,000 combined. They go entirely to my son, David Carson. I was crying now. I couldn't help it. Tears streaming down my face while Morrison read my mother's words, explaining how she'd spent years, protecting me, saving for me, planning for this exact moment. Fourth, life insurance. 3 years ago, when I first got my diagnosis and knew I was dying, I bought a life insurance policy through my employer. The premiums came directly from my paycheck, money Thomas never saw because he didn't know how much I actually made. The policy cost me $200 a month for 3 years. Total paid, $7,200. The payout on that policy is $250,000. I established it as a trust to be managed by Richard Morrison until my son turns 25, at which point he receives full control. The trust is designed to pay for college, housing, and living expenses. It cannot be touched by creditors, cannot be claimed by my ex-husband, and cannot be contested. It goes entirely to my son, David Carson. Morrison looked up from the document. The total value of assets being transferred to you, David, is approximately $842,000. That includes the land, the cash account, the jewelry, and the life insurance trust. The room was spinning. $842,000. Nearly $1 million. My mother, who I thought had died with nothing, had saved me nearly $1 million. This is impossible, Vanessa screamed, jumping to her feet. She couldn't have hidden that much money. You're lying. This is fraud. This is entirely legal, Morrison said, his voice cutting through her hysteria like a knife. I have documentation for every asset. Land deeds showing Margaret Brennan as the owner since 1998, bank statements showing 8 years of deposits and growth, appraisals of the jewelry from a certified gemologist, the life insurance policy paperwork. Everything is in perfect legal order. Thomas? Vanessa spun on my father. Do something. She stole from you. That money should be yours. What money? Morrison asked calmly. Money she earned after the divorce, money she inherited before the marriage, money she received from life insurance she paid for herself. Please explain which of these assets Mr. Carson has any legal claim to. My father just sat there, his face gray, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. It's real, he whispered. She actually did it. She hid everything. For years. She didn't hide anything illegal, Morrison corrected. She managed her own finances in her own name using her own earnings. The only thing she hid was the fact that she was doing it, which, while perhaps not forthcoming, is entirely legal. Vanessa lunged across the table, reaching for the documents. Give me those. I need to see proof. This is lies. This is... Morrison pressed a button on a phone. Immediately, a security guard entered, a large man in a uniform who looked like he dealt with difficult people regularly. Please escort Mrs. Carson from the building, Morrison said calmly. She's becoming disruptive and is not a beneficiary of this will. She has no legal right to be here. You can't throw me out, Vanessa shrieked as the guard took her arm. This is theft, fraud. I'll sue, You'll do nothing, Morrison said, his voice like ice. Because you have no legal standing, no claim to any of these assets, and no grounds for any lawsuit. Good day, Mrs. Carson. The guard walked her toward the door. She kept screaming about lawyers and fraud and justice, but her voice faded as he escorted her down the hallway. A door slammed. Silence. Morrison turned to my father. Mr. Carson, do you have anything you'd like to say? My father looked at me for the first time since the reading began. Really looked at me, his eyes meeting mine. And I saw something I'd never seen before. Defeat. Complete, total defeat. I didn't know, he said quietly. I thought she was barely surviving. I thought she had nothing. I thought when she died, there'd be nothing left. You thought you'd won, I said, finding my voice. You thought you could throw me out with nothing and I'd just disappear, become someone else's problem. He trailed off. The house. Vanessa and I, we mortgaged it. Heavily. We're behind on payments. I thought, when Margaret died, maybe there'd be something to help us. You thought you'd profit from my mother's death, Morrison said, his voice cold enough to freeze water. After years of neglecting your son, mocking her illness, showing no compassion whatsoever, you thought you deserved something from her estate? The bank is threatening foreclosure, my father continued, talking to himself more than us. We owe $200,000. We don't have it. I thought maybe Margaret had life insurance or something that would come to me as her ex-husband or at least help our son so I wouldn't have to. He trailed off again, realizing how that sounded. So you wouldn't have to support him yourself, Morrison finished. Yes, that's very clear. Well, Mr. Carson, your ex-wife did have life insurance. Quite a lot of it. All going to your son, who you threw out of your house the day his mother died. I hope that information brings you joy. My father stood up slowly. He looked old suddenly, tired, broken. Can I speak to you? Privately? He was looking at me. No, I said. Please. David, I'm your father. I made mistakes, but I'm still your father. We should talk about this. About how to handle this money, about your future, and you'll need guidance. Guidance? The word came out sharp. From you, the man who told me I was nothing, who threw me out while I was grieving, who chose his wife over his son. I was wrong, he said, and tears were starting to form in his eyes. I was weak. Vanessa, she convinced me that you'd be fine, that you'd figure things out, that it was time for you to be independent. But I see now, I should have been stronger. I should have been there for you. You're only sorry because Mom outsmarted you, I said. If she'd actually died with nothing, if I was actually homeless and broke right now, would you be here apologizing? Or would you still be at home with Vanessa celebrating being rid of me? He didn't answer. We both knew the answer. Mr. Carson, Morrison said, I think it's time for you to leave. I have paperwork to finalize with my client. Can I just... 1 more minute? No, Morrison said firmly. Your time here is done. The will has been read. The assets have been assigned. You are not a beneficiary. You have no further business here. Please leave before I call security to escort you as well. My father looked at me one more time. I saw him calculating, trying to figure out an angle, a way to benefit from this situation. Then he realized there wasn't one. His ex-wife had beaten him completely. I'm sorry, he said, but it sounded hollow. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. It's worth nothing, I said. Now get out. He left, shoulders slumped, walking like a man going to his execution. When the door closed behind him, Morrison sat back down. Well, that was unpleasant. Is it real? I asked, my voice shaking. All of it? The land, the money, everything? Every word. Your mother was a remarkable woman. She came to see me 3 years ago, shortly after her diagnosis, and said, I need to protect my son. I'm dying, and when I'm gone, his father will destroy him. Help me make sure that doesn't happen. Morrison pulled out more folders. So we did. We moved assets into her maiden name. We opened accounts your father couldn't find. We established a trust he couldn't touch. We documented everything meticulously so that when this moment came, there would be no question, no ambiguity, no way for anyone to claim fraud or illegality. Why didn't she tell me? Because she was afraid you'd tell your father, or that you'd be too young to keep the secret, or that knowing would change how you acted, make you less stressed about money, and that would tip off your father that something was different. She wanted you protected, but she also wanted you safe from the burden of knowing. He opened a folder and pulled out documents. Keys. More paperwork than I'd ever seen in my life. These are the keys to the safety deposit box containing the jewelry. It's at First Regional Bank downtown. This is the deed to the property in New York. These are the account numbers and access information for the credit union account. And this, he pulled out a thick manila envelope, is all the documentation for the life insurance trust. He spread everything across the table. You now have assets worth approximately $842,000. The land alone is valued at $380,000. The cash is immediately accessible. The jewelry can be sold or kept as you prefer. And the trust will be managed by me until you turn 25, at which point you receive full control. Until then, it pays out monthly for your living expenses, education, and approved purchases. I couldn't speak, couldn't process any of this. Yesterday I'd been sleeping on a couch with $800 to my name. Today I was rich? Not billionaire rich, but life-changing rich. Never worry about money again rich. There's also this, Morrison said gently, pulling out one more envelope. This one was simple, white, with my name written on it in my mother's handwriting. She wanted you to have this, privately. I'll step out of the room. Take your time. He stood and left, closing the door behind him. I sat alone in that conference room, staring at the envelope, my mother's handwriting, the last words she'd ever write to me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. Inside were 5 pages, front and back, completely filled with my mother's neat handwriting. I started reading through tears that made the words blur. My dearest David, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if everything went according to plan, you just watched your father and that horrible woman realize they got nothing while you got everything. I hope you saw their faces. I hope you saw them understand that they lost, that I beat them, that even from beyond death, I protected you from the people who would hurt you. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to protect you in person. I'm sorry you had to deal with them alone. I'm sorry you had to go through my death and their cruelty without me there to help. But I hope this inheritance, this protection, this last gift, makes it a little easier. Let me explain everything. The land in upstate New York is beautiful. It's where I spent summers as a child with my parents before they died. There's a small cabin that needs work, but it's peaceful there, quiet. The kind of place where you can breathe and think and heal. Maybe you'll want to live there someday. Maybe you'll want to sell it. Maybe you'll keep it as a retreat. It's yours. Do whatever makes you happy. The money in the credit union account, use it wisely. Don't blow it on stupid things. Go to college, travel, buy a reliable car, build a life. But remember that money doesn't make you happy. It just makes life easier. Your happiness has to come from you, from the choices you make, from the person you decide to be. The jewelry was my grandmother's. She survived the Great Depression, World War II, and more tragedy than anyone should have to face. She was the strongest woman I ever knew. When she gave me these pieces, she said, "These are symbols of survival. Wear them and remember that you come from people who don't quit. You come from that strength too, David. You can survive anything. The life insurance trust is for your future. I set it up with Mr. Morrison because I trust him completely. He'll help you use the money wisely, for education, for housing, for building the kind of life I always wanted you to have. Don't waste it. Don't let it change who you are. It's a tool, not a personality. Now let me tell you what I really want to say. Don't waste energy hating your father. I know that's hard. I know he hurt you terribly, but he's weak, David. He always was. He chose comfort over character, a beautiful wife over his own son, easy lies over hard truths. That's who he is. Hating him won't change him. It'll only hurt you. The best revenge is living well. So live well. Vanessa is a parasite. She married your father for money and status. When he loses both, and he will lose both because I know his finances are a disaster, she'll leave him for someone richer. That's her nature. Let her. It's not your problem. She's not your problem. You never have to see her again. Build a good life, baby. That's all I want. Build a life full of people who love you for who you are, not what you have. Find work that matters to you. Find someone who loves you the way you deserve, completely, without conditions, through all the hard times. Have a family if you want one, or don't. Travel, learn, grow. Just be happy. Happiness is the only thing that matters. Not money, not success, not proving anything to anyone. Just finding peace and joy in your days. That's what I wanted for you from the moment you were born. I'm so sorry I couldn't stay longer. I'm sorry I can't see the man you'll become. I'm sorry I won't be there for your graduation, your wedding, the birth of your children. I'm sorry for all the moments I'll miss. But I'll always be with you, in your memories, in the lessons I taught you, in the strength you inherited from me and from your grandmother and from all the strong people who came before us. We don't quit, David. We don't give up. We survive. And you will survive this. You'll grieve for me. Please grieve for me. Don't try to be strong all the time, and then you'll heal. And then you'll build something beautiful with your life. I know you will. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for holding my hand. Thank you for being there when your father wasn't. Thank you for being exactly the son I needed, wanted, and loved more than life itself. You were the best thing I ever did with my life. Being your mother was the greatest honor I ever had. I'm so proud of you. So proud of the person you are and the person you'll become. Remember, you are loved. You are protected. You are enough. Even when I'm not there to tell you. I love you forever and always, Mom P.S. There's one more thing. I want you to use some of this money to go back to school. Study something you love. Don't worry about whether it's practical or profitable. Just study something that makes you excited to wake up in the morning. You have enough money now. Chase passion, not paychecks. Promise me. I sat there and cried until I couldn't cry anymore, until my throat was raw and my eyes burned and my chest ached from sobbing. I cried for my mom, for everything she'd been through, for how she'd spent 3 years planning this, saving for this, protecting me even while dying. I cried from relief, from grief, from overwhelming gratitude. When Morrison came back, I don't know how long later, he didn't comment on my red eyes or swollen face. He just sat down calmly and said, "Your mother left instructions for me as well. I'd like to share one of them if you're ready." I nodded, unable to speak. She said, "When David reads my letter and cries, and he will cry because he has a good heart, tell him that I'm not sad. Tell him I'm at peace. Tell him I spent my last 3 years knowing I'd won, that I'd beaten Thomas and protected my boy. Tell him that died happy because of that." Morrison smiled slightly. "I've been a lawyer for 35 years. I've overseen hundreds of estates. Your mother's planning was the most meticulous, most determined, and most loving estate plan I've ever witnessed. She spent 3 years making sure every single detail was perfect, every asset protected, every loophole closed, every potential challenge anticipated and prevented. Why didn't she just tell my father to go to hell? Why play nice for 3 years while she was dying? Because if he'd known what she was doing, he might have tried to stop her. He might have fought for access to her accounts, her property, her plans. By staying quiet, by letting him think she had nothing, she protected everything until it was too late for him to interfere." Morrison gathered the papers. "We have some paperwork to complete. Signatures for the asset transfers, tax documents, trust agreements. But that can wait a few days if you need time. There's no rush." "No," I said, wiping my face. "Let's do it now. Mom spent 3 years planning this. The least I can do is see it through." We spent the next 2 hours signing documents, transferring assets, establishing access to accounts. With every signature, I felt more real, more solid, more like a person with a future instead of a homeless kid sleeping on a couch. When we finished, Morrison handed me a folder containing copies of everything. "You're now the owner of 47 acres in New York, $127,000 in cash, approximately $85,000 in jewelry, and beneficiary of a $250,000 trust fund. Congratulations, you're wealthy." "I don't feel wealthy," I admitted. "I feel lost." "That's normal. Grief does that, but you'll find your way. And when you need help, legal advice, financial planning, just someone to talk to who knew your mother, call me, anytime." He handed me his personal card. "Your mother was a client, but she was also a friend. By extension, you're a friend too. Don't hesitate to reach out." I left Morrison and Associates at 5 p.m., walking out into a spring evening that seemed impossibly bright and alive. My car was still in the parking lot, still dented and old, but I had keys to a property in New York in my pocket, bank account information for $127,000 in my wallet, a future that suddenly seemed possible again. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. "We need to talk. About the inheritance, about helping family. Call me." I deleted it without responding. Another text from Vanessa. "You owe us. We raised you. We deserve compensation. This is theft." I blocked her number. I drove back to Jake's apartment in a daze. He was home playing video games. "How'd it go?" he asked. Then he saw my face. "Dude, what happened?" "My mom left me everything," I said. "Land, money, jewelry. Almost $1 million worth." Jake's controller fell from his hands. "What?" "She'd been planning it for 3 years, hiding assets, protecting me from my dad. It's all mine." Holy shit. Holy shit. Dude, you're rich." "Yeah," I said, and started laughing. Couldn't help it. Just started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound. "I'm rich. Yesterday I was homeless. Today I'm rich. It's insane." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Sleep in a real bed for the first time in a week? Eat something that isn't ramen? Figure out what the hell comes next?" Jake grinned. "Well, you can start by buying me dinner. Rich guy." I did. We went to a nice restaurant. Nothing crazy expensive, but nicer than the fast food we usually survived on. I paid with my debit card, knowing that card was now connected to an account with $127,000 in it. That night, lying on Jake's couch for what I hoped was the last time, I thought about everything that had happened. How I'd lost my mother and been thrown out in the same day. How I'd thought I'd lost everything. But Mom had made sure I didn't lose everything. She'd protected me even when she couldn't be there. She'd planned for my future when her own was ending. She'd loved me enough to spend 3 years saving me from people who would have destroyed me. That's what real love looks like, not grand gestures or empty words, but quiet protection, careful planning, sacrifice that continues even after death. I fell asleep thinking about that, about love that survives death, about mothers who never stop protecting their children. And for the first time since Mom died, I felt something other than grief. I felt hope.